We're very excited to have you with us and three excellent panelists with us. We have Chris Borchhuizen from Data Collective, who's a partner there, former founder and CTO of Planet. We've got Adnan Al-Rais, the director of Remote Sensing Department at MBRSC, the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center in UAE. As well as that, we've got Robert Boehm, who's the CEO of PT Scientist, or part-time scientist. And yeah, we're very excited to have this discussion on the startup space ecosystem. After this, we will have a set of speakers, three TED-style speakers. And we very much would like to have you here for that as well. And then we will go on to a cocktail reception. You will be provided with wristbands so that you can have all the unlimited drinks that are on offer. So before any further ado, let's begin our panel. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. So I've just given a very short introduction to the three of you, and I wanted to say thank you very much for being here. I must say this is my first time being on a panel like this, and excited to have the discussion. So we've got a range, the full range of the space industry here, from government agency with Adnan's perspective. We've got the VC venture capital angle from Chris, and then we also have Robert, who is a CEO of a flourishing startup called Part-Time Scientist. So it would be great if you could just, each of you, do an intro for a few minutes, and then we'll go into the questions.
Okay, if you allow me to start. Hi everyone, my name is Adnan Al-Rais. I'm the Director of Remote Sensing Department's mission and also the Program Manager for the Mars 2117. I'm coming from the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. This is a government initiative to support sustainable development science technology sector in the UAE. We are in charge of the implementation of the National Space Program, working on the four main programs on the Sustainable Development Satellite Program. We've launched a couple of satellites, and we're launching the third one end of this month, and also working on the Mars Exploration Program and Mars 2117 100 years of strategy to build settlement on Mars and send human to Mars. And finally, we have our astronaut program, which is a sustainable program to develop the core UAE astronaut team. And we're very happy and proud that we're going to have our first astronaut to be launched to the International Space Station April 2019.
Yeah, so my name is Chris, and I think I've had the same job for the last 18 years, which is kind of cool. So I got started in Australia trying to stimulate the Australian space industry, which was absent at the time. Very glad that we now have an agency there in Australia. And then I was very active in space generation and the IAF, organizing a number of conferences in various cities where the IAC was held. And then I was working at NASA Ames Research Center. So NASA has 10 centers around the United States. I worked at NASA Ames for 5 years, again trying to stimulate the space industry by developing new kinds of spacecraft and doing commercialization and spin-outs. One of those spin-outs happened to be Planet Labs. And so we went, and again with the same goal, to help lift the tide of all space companies by demonstrating new capabilities in low Earth orbit, which I think we were very successful. And I'm very proud to see that there are, hundreds, if not thousands, of companies now attempting to do space startups. My new role is, as a venture capitalist, again to do the same job, which is to support, inspire, and facilitate the growth of the space industry. So I'm very excited to be here today and share some of that with you.
Hello, I'm Robert, and from the PT Scientist. Thank you that you introduced us as part-time scientists, which is a name that still holds true, because we're a private space company which initially got funded by 6 scientists and engineers, my friends, 10 years ago. And today we're a private space company still, but more than 60 people working on privately putting hardware on the moon and around the moon. So really doing space mission towards the moon and making them commercially viable. That's the goal. Really showing that space exploration can be both bold and going out there, but also giving you a profit and make it worthwhile to do it ongoing. And the key thing that we always kind of claim for ourselves is that we want to do with each mission that we do, we want to enable and make a subsequent mission easier. So putting something out there that supports future space development.
Excellent, thank you very much. One thing I did forget to mention at the start was that this event is sponsored by MBRSC, so we'd like to once again thank you for contributing to SGAC and helping the next generation get involved in such events as well, so thank you. So just to start with kind of a light introductory question, given the interesting convergence of the three of you here, what do you think is important and interesting about the space ecosystem right now? And how does it compare to other opportunities in other industries?
Allow me to start?
Yeah, please.
All right. Well, the ecosystem has changed compared to the past few years, 10, 15 years. The space ecosystem used to be run and controlled and driven by government, running the space programs, space projects, the next generation of technologies. Nowadays, we can see that we have new countries, developing, emerging nations, as well as developed countries entering the space sector and the space industry. It's becoming like one of the pillars of their strategy as well. In addition to that, we have more and more involvement of the private sector, as well as the increasing role of the VC funds, entrepreneurs. This is leading into the innovative technologies, solutions, as well as introducing new business models, new financial models that we did not see in the early days. Now it's becoming more energetic, I can say, more creative, and this actually led to attracting more and more entrepreneurs and startups to work in the space sector.
Yeah, I sort of want to echo that. I think there's been a big transformation. I think Bryce, your company, published a report 2 years ago. I'd love to see the updated version, actually, which I haven't read yet, but we're quoting statistics of investment in the space industry. So in 2015, there was more cash put into, venture capital cash, put into space startups than the previous 15 years combined. And I think 2016 and 2017 have also been much larger years. So when I was thinking about that last night, I was talking with some people over dinner about that number. I realized, of course, about 15 years ago was, 2002, 2003. That was when the Columbia space shuttle, unfortunately, met its demise on re-entry into the atmosphere. And at that point, I almost quit the space industry because, there didn't seem to be a lot happening. I was very unsure if anything was ever going to take off. That we'd ever have space startups, there'd ever be anything meaningful to do in space as a private citizen, non-astronaut. And then, fast forward 15 years, things are radically different. The industry couldn't be more vibrant and exciting and dynamic, and there is so much interest. And I see the size of this conference this year as testament to how we have been able to attract people to this industry. And, particularly with the work you're doing. Non-traditional actors participating in space is transformational, and I think I have no idea what's going to come in the next few years, but I hope that this upward trend is. I'd love to see some data on this, but what's going to happen around the corner, I have no idea, but I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, and I also want to kind of touch into the point that Adnan and that Chris, you both raised, is that I think that one of the key themes of the IAC, which I noticed so far, is kind of this enablement. And this is something, even you have it in your hashtag, like involve everyone. So, and I think this is what you can notice with the space industry right now, at least from our perspective. Everybody is kind of, as we say, I come from the IT industry, and always it's saying you stand on the shoulders of giants. And it kind of, that is the feeling that I'm seeing for the space industry now. There are now multiple options for launch vehicles. 10 years ago, for example, it was a big thing for us to think about how could you launch in space? Today, there's dozens of commercial opportunities. There's a number of opportunities to get standardized payloads and so. And I think that is really opening up space exploration for everyone. And that is something which is exciting, and I think which fuels this interest both by VC, but also by the entities actually kind of doing the work and getting excited, starting the businesses. So I think that's a really, really good development coming up.
Yeah, that's very interesting points you've raised, and it's interesting to look back over the last 15 years to see what the trigger point might have been in terms of attracting so much capital, and you have certain exits that came about with the Skybella? Sterabella, sorry. Terabella, yeah. So that brought in capital and the innovations that SpaceX was doing as well. So there's a lot of capital flowing in, but I'd like to know kind of from Robert, your side, what were the major roadblocks along the way in terms of going from kind of a scrappy startup, either regulatory, technical, market access? What did you stumble upon, and what were you able to do to overcome them?
It's a good question. So looking at our past, we started 10 years ago as people with no space background. So, many private space startups are still kind of fueled today by people who have a space background, or at least, kind of the right education on that. But, we were people mostly crossing over from industries like the medical industry or the IT industry. So for us, one of the bigger roadblocks was trust. So we really needed to establish ourselves. And that was a big challenge. It took us like 5 years. And what we've learned is we could only earn this trust by working with the entities like the German Space Agency back then, for example, taking them by their point, if you get rejected, then go to the people and, ask them why. Make it understand, that you want to kind of demonstrate to them that you can solve that issue. And then for us, it was constantly kind of demonstrating that we can overcome the hurdles that they think we face. But this was always on a technical level. So I think something which might be quite prevalent for the private space industry, that you actually have to do something. So for some industries, it's actually quite good to have an idea, but I think what helps for private space is to actually have working and qualifiable prototypes. That is something which gives you for us, it helped us get the credibility that we need. And another roadblock which I see in the past, and hopefully this one is something which is still existing, but I think we can all work on that, is the policy topic. Because that is something which, we now started to, for the first time ever, to work with investors. And what I see from the feedback and all of the questions and rounds that you do with them is that if they ask some silly questions, I asked myself 10 years ago, can I go to the moon? Can I buy a rocket? Is it okay if I buy a rocket? Is it okay if I land on the moon? Silly stuff, But as it turns out, some of these questions are not silly and they're not really answerable today. And if you now today get asked this question by an investor, there is no good answer for it. There are some answers, and we have some legal perspectives, some guidance, but this undefined realm, that's a little bit of a danger that I see. So a policy topic also.
And I think that really nicely touches on what MBRSC might be able to answer is, what are governments doing and agencies like MBRSC, or what can they do to help against overcome those roadblocks that Robert was touching on?
Right. So as a government entity, talking about the space sector in the UAE, what we had to do is that we needed, first of all, to establish that ecosystem, starting from us as a government entity by having a clear vision, a clear program, a sustainable program that we're working on. And out of those programs, when we have a sustainable program, here we're going to create opportunities for the startups and entrepreneurs and industry, and opening a door for them to get involved and engage with our activities. Second thing, which is actually important thing, which is taking risks. Government and agencies tend to take less risk, take longer duration in terms of the project management, in terms of the R&D, till they reach the end result. We take the risk, and this is what we did from beginning. Give an example, we developed and worked on our first mission, Dubai Sat-1, with our South Korean partner SATRIC initiative. It was the first mission for both of us, for that commercial entity and for us as well, to work together. But we took that risk. We worked together because for us, the optimum goal was the development of the skill sets, the expertise, the knowledge. This is what was important for us. So taking the risk is an important thing, as well as in terms of the policies. So we recently, as UAE, we've announced the UAE space policy and the space investments policy. And I would say that the policies set in order to facilitate the work, in order to allow the entrepreneurs and startups to get more and more engaged, rather than putting those regulations and imposing certain rules that they have to follow. At the end of the day, it won't be viable for them to build that reliable and feasible business model. Yeah.
Thank you. And Chris, it's kind of, in terms of your work, you see hundreds of startups, I'm sure. Just to talk about what should they be focusing on more, and what should they just try to avoid in order to get their business in the right direction?
Yeah, so actually I think Robert sort of answered that earlier. I think hardware is king. So I did realize early on in the sort of first part of my space career that all of these organizations that I worked for had space in the name, but had nothing in space. And that's worth thinking about. So the big change for me was when I got to NASA Ames, we started actually trying to build new kinds of space hardware. And I developed a simple rule, which was we built the prototype first and our PowerPoint slides second. And we follow that to this day. And I think this is like really useful. A lot of people have an idea and they sort of spend a lot of time in the ideation and pitching stage. But I would rather get online with a credit card and buy $100 worth of hardware and try and build it. And then even if it looks like, frankly, a piece of junk, take that around and show it to people. And that act of instantiating something physical in the world, and this also holds true for software, build the software instead of talking about it. But instantiating something in the world and bringing it to people will actually get you more support and interest than any presentation ever will. And so I think that's really the key, and what I look for in startups is people who are rolling up their sleeve and building the thing they want to build. And then once they build it, I think, the pieces, you start to see the whole picture forming in front of you. It becomes real, and you can attract interest. You can attract people who want to work on it. You can attract investment. You can attract supporters. You can attract customers. And so I think make it real is sort of my motto.
Thank you. And Robert, having gone through the whole GLXP experience, how did you pivot from that? And you might not even consider that as your main kind of future commercial revenue opportunity, but what was your move after the whole GLXP expired?
Yeah, so just to mention, GLXP for maybe probably the few people in the room who don't know it, it's the Google Lunar Xprize challenge. This challenge set out by the two founders of Google in 2007, basically awarding $30 million to the first private entity to land on the moon. And that is something which landed in my inbox as an email from a friend in 2008, something like this, in the beginning. And there was something like the last call reminder of register for this competition. And really, for me, it was like I was looking at this email and I was thinking like, wow, okay, what is Google doing? They're doing something with space. And I was at the time an IT guy, so for me, it was quite striking because it showed that they actually believed that you privately could do something in space. This thought hasn't struck me up until that time. Up until that time, for me, space was something that only people at NASA could do, people with white coats, the right kind of education, who did it all their life, that are the only people who can ever do space. That was kind of my perspective. But I was always really excited about space, but would never have seen myself. But seeing that email leading that challenge, and then, I had like 2 days left to register, that was kind of like, I don't know, so far I would say a good decision in my life to say, okay, let's do it, let's do this crazy thing. So the GLXP was, and that's something very important here, was a very good, was it a catalyst? I think that's the right English term, the starting point. And it was a very good excuse. If I would have gone out there on the streets, talked to people like the German Space Agency or to like other companies where we got some parts and so I worked with, and say, I want to send something to the moon, you might have been, sent away like, oh no, don't call us, we call you, But with the GLXP, it was something where Google gave their name and credibility to something, so you actually had a good excuse to talk to people. So it was a door opener. It didn't, make things easy. As you noticed, all of the teams were kind of struggling and it was really challenging, but it helped kind of get them started. And I would even go as far to say, it's really a hard judgment, but I even think that the fact that the GLXP now expired and is no longer a thing might actually be good. Because there is no this grand finale, there's no one winner and, like this, all this fanfare. But it's really just, it was the starting point, and now the entities who really worked on business concepts, they actually can push it through, and they had this leverage, they had all the time and all the work that they could do in the back end, because the GLXP had quite some technical requirements, and they underwent some review processes where a number of teams, including us, won so-called challenges, so where we could prove that our hardware worked, and when we got some money from Google, which was quite valuable. It gave us the credibility, so we could go to other people and say, hey, we got this award because we did these lab testings of radiation, thermal vacuum, all the stuff. But at the same time, also it gave us the funding, an initial funding, which we could use for new developments. So the GLXP was, I think, a very good thing, actually, even though it didn't work out as expected.
I think it's a pretty high leverage event that you can inspire someone to change their career and start a space company based on an email alone. So it's a pretty high leverage activity.
Yeah, and GLXP was clearly a very international endeavor. You had companies like iSpace from Japan involved, and prior to that, space was very much a US-centric kind of endeavor. You had Russia as well. And as you look at the Bryce report, as you mentioned, it does talk about how the US is the vast majority of capital that flows into venture-backed capital that flows into startups. But this is slowly changing, and Japan is a big player. You have the UK as well, kind of in the top 5 venture capital nations where investors are based. So I wanted to kind of touch on that a bit. What do you think that dynamic is? How do you think that dynamic is going to play out over the next 5 years in terms of that international partnerships and between not just public-private partnerships, but also companies moving around and setting up bases internationally? So Dan, if you could comment on that.
Yeah, I can see that this is happening, and this is actually, I saw it in a couple of the new VC funds. Sometimes the requirements that you have to move into a different country to establish your businesses. And this is something that we're working on a model, something similar, because we have the program, we have the projects, and now we need to attract the industry to come. And we are working on a model where we want to attract the industry to come and be located in Dubai and in the UAE, close to the activities. And it's very important for us because we don't want to work with entities that are far away. We want to have 2 teams working together as a single entity. In order to do that, it's really important that they will be in the same area, in the same place. And second thing is that we develop a lot of infrastructure, a lot of facilities, right? And those facilities could be efficiently used and utilized when you have the industry established around you. So allowing the industry to access the facilities, use it, generate some products as solutions to be part of the whole picture.
Yeah, so in 2013, we put 3 spacecraft into space that had this as the entire spacecraft. So this is a phone. And this was the PhoneSat project at NASA Ames. And what was interesting about that is at the time, that had probably the most powerful flight computer of any spacecraft that I knew of at the time. It had more memory, more processor, more RAM. It had a high-resolution camera. It had lots of storage. Had a lot of radios, not all of them useful in orbit, but it had them, and we could use them for different things. And so this was a satellite that cost about $500 and $80,000 to launch. We launched 3 of them for $225,000 US on an Antares rocket. So you think about that, a single satellite, extremely high capability for only $80,000. What that means is it was basically Sputnik with a camera, right? And if you think about that, every single one of you has in your pocket right now more space capability than the USSR had in 1957. So I think that really has changed the world. Space is no longer the domain of 2 or 3 large national governments, but not only can other countries start participating in fantastic ways as we've seen here, but individuals and companies can too. And I think that's the big sea change that's happened. And even startups aside, I'd be more excited to see university groups, student groups, clubs and societies. I mean, any student group could raise a Kickstarter campaign for $80,000 and launch their own satellite. So I want to see a whole bunch of non-traditional actors, citizens, regular people. We talk about citizen science and citizen space all the time. This is a really real example of how anyone around the world can do more interesting things in space than the USSR or the USA could do 40 years ago. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, just to quickly follow up on that, because this phone set is something which I remember was really a big impact also from our side, from the engineering team, because I think around that time, really this term skyrocketed commercial off the shelf, because up until that time, we also weren't kind of sure what hardware to use. And there's always this kind of this disconnect between going the old space way with super redundancy and very expensive hardware, or kind of mixing it up system-wise a little bit. And that was something which kind of helped us also from the understanding. So just trying to think about something to add here. But
we could come back to that after. So we've got a couple of minutes to go before we move on to the next segment of tonight. Are there any questions from the audience? Oh, sorry.
So but there's something to, I remember, because the initial question that you asked were more about the international aspect, but something that came to my mind at that moment was the fact, something not just the effect about international collaborations, but also about company collaborations. Because something which, for us was a special thing is that we managed, and it's not wanting to highlight ourselves, but it's something which I think is quite interesting, that we managed to get non-space actors to expand their product range into space. For example, like with Audi and Vodafone, who are now offering services, and that's something which you might not notice if you just look at their nice commercials and videos that they do about the mission, but they actually really see this as an extension of the portfolio. And that's something which I think, if you manage to inspire classical industry players to reach out, that is, I think, also a good benefit for everybody. It might not be the international angle, but it's like the cross-economics angle.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Robert. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yep, Antonio, right there.
Right. One thing that I was curious, and perhaps MBRSC could also speak a bit more about this, but after we have the entrepreneurship boom in the new space sector, have we also seen a boom in the internationalization, all these developing and emerging countries without space agencies, without space infrastructure actually tapping into the availability of off-the-shelf components and also cheaper launch capabilities, and how do you see this market growing, and how has it impacted your market strategy for the coming decade or so, and not just like in partnership but also investment as well? I think that's for both Data Collective and MBRSC. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So if I got your question correctly, that you asked about the new space and the changes in the model that we have with the lower cost in terms of launch and development, how this will impact us. We have within our center an independent team that is working on the next technologies, how we develop our system, because we are following certain philosophy in our system design and development and project management. And then we have another team that's exploring that opportunity, so that you build a mission that is like a plug and play, for instance, where you can also use the existing technologies. You don't need really to develop things from scratch. As well as the working internationally. And this is something that we always do. I mean, we work internationally with universities. We are working internationally with the international companies, agencies. I think it's very important to have this international link, because at the end of the day, you won't be able to do everything by yourself. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, and I think you're also asking about sort of new types of participation from new countries and new governments. And I think a great example is New Zealand. Who would have ever guessed that there would be a fantastic launch company born and bred and launching out of New Zealand? I think that's fantastic. As we invested in Rocket Lab a year and a half ago, And I think it's amazing to see just the creativity and talent there is around the world, and the new types of products that are coming out of different countries. So definitely true.
Okay, we have time for one final question. Yep, you've got the mic.
Yeah, thanks for the great panel, guys. Thanks. Mark here. I'm from Berlin. I work in startup ecosystems, and I've got a question around venture capital. So, as we see, traditional venture capitalists still shy away from hardware pretty much out of obvious reasons. What do you think will be the main kind of gateways, the main keys to getting venture capitalists cross the chasm between startup ecosystem and space startup ecosystem, and investing more in that?
Could I go first and then you? Okay. Because it's something which touches upon the good point that you made, because you said that hardware is king, which is, that's, I think, definitely the reality. But, if at the same, when I get your point, as you say that if hardware is important, how do you fund the development of the hardware? That's actually kind of very good question there, because for us, in our case, we had to privately fund it. So really pay it with our own money. That's why we worked part-time, getting our salary and then investing it in hardware. That's not a good and not a fast approach. So, and we had the same experience. We talked to a whole lot of investors, and there was these two issues. One, of course, that they kind of didn't understand space. And the other thing is that they said, we don't want to pay for all of the tooling and workshops and everything, and why do you need the machines and stuff? So this problem is definitely there. I'm really not sure how to solve it. Maybe you have the answer.
Yeah, well, I think actually what we're seeing is the blurring between the lines between hardware and software. So, the name of our firm is Data Collective VC. We like to invest in companies that collect large data sets that have machine learning and analytics. So on the surface, it looks like we wouldn't do hardware. But what we're seeing now is that hardware is essential for collecting a lot of this data. Whether it be, cameras, IoT is fantastic. And a source of a huge amount of data. And then you have companies like Planet Labs that have cameras in space that are collecting huge data sets as well. And so we're seeing a kind of software and hardware data collection and analytics combo that is very compelling. And so could you get funding for a purely mechanical device today that worked in isolation? Maybe not. But if you had something that had a huge amount of data processing, analytics, and derived products, I think the hardware is easy to accept because the hardware gives you an advantage. If you can collect your own data, you can generate your own data, and you own that data, you have a leg up over everybody else. So hardware is actually the key to invincibility and to locking out your own part of the market.
And speaking of hardware, we have a couple of talks coming up right now. Both one is iSpace and one is Open Cosmos, both dealing with hardware. So I just wanted to say thank you to our panelists for a very engaging discussion, and I hope you will stick around for the reception that will follow on after the speaker session. So thank you. Please. All right, so we're just about to kick off our three TED-style speakers. First up will be Rafael Geodesic, the founder and CEO of Open Cosmos. So please give it up for Rafael.
Okay. Perfect. So hello. This is not a talk about Open Cosmos itself. It's more to inspire, to explain a little bit the road that we went through since I started and founded the company 3 years ago until today. For background, though, Open Cosmos provides simple and affordable space missions. So yes, we do provide everything from the satellite up until the operations up in orbit. Everything started with this picture, actually. And I was moved by the words of Chris earlier, by the way, because we took this picture when we were students with 100 euros. And we did it with a camera that we put on top of an helium balloon. We brought it to the stratosphere, and you can see the curvature of Earth there, the black sky on the top, and this inspired us. This was kind of an aha moment for me, where I thought, well, actually, you can do things that are related to space and that could inspire you to go towards space with really little budget. Why are people not doing it? So ever since I took this picture, my mind was set up to do something to change it, to make access to space something real, democratize this technology and democratize the possibility to use it for all purposes. And this was a little piece that was key for the enabling of all of that. When I left our boss, I had this vision already of starting Open Cosmos, and I had to find a way to fund it. And the single thing that came to my mind is, well, I have to sell, but what can I sell? And that's the moment when I started building these little boards here that were used in CanSats. CanSats, for those of you that don't know, are like sort of small satellites the size of a cone that are put on sounding rockets. And it was quite a successful product. The European Space Agency bought a lot of them, so students all over Europe would use them. It has very basic transceiver, a little microprocessor based on an Arduino, and students started putting payloads on top of it. And it was an inspiring way, a nice way to get people to learn how to use space technology. From there, things escalated quickly. And this was the Christmas time of 2015. I have already established the company. We had done the first sales. And the possibility to launch the first satellite came. Many of you might know about the KB50. There were a few satellites that weren't making it on time, and someone just approached us and said, hey, would you like to try to put the satellite in orbit? Would you be able to deliver it in about 6 months? And I was, whew, 6 months, we'll have to go through the full cycle. I cannot promise you that we will deliver, but we'll do our best. And that's how we ended up here in Kiruna during Christmas time, because we had labs there that were available for us for free, and we ended up assembling and going through several iterations of a full satellite over that period of time. This that you see over here is in Kiruna. As you can imagine, during Christmas time, it's pretty cold. And there is perpetual darkness. So the team used to go running and walking a little bit in cycles during that madness, a extreme workload period. So starting a startup is not something easy, but it's something that if you are passionate about, definitely takes you somewhere. This was the first team members. Some of them, we call them the ninjas for obvious reasons. These are our space ninjas, and some of them I found when I moved to the UK, to London, where I started the company, and they were among the most knowledgeable and experienced people that I found, actually, and I'm really proud about the team that we have been putting. On others I knew from the times when I was back at the university. And the whole project came through. We hit every single milestone during that period, and we eventually delivered the satellite in 6 months. This is the day of the launch, actually. It was launched on an Atlas V to the International Space Station, deployed thereafter. The satellite is still up there, fully functional, and we are really proud about it, because it was something that, whenever we started, it was something that was not done before. What we did thereafter was taking the following step. We started selling more missions. The word around the industry spread, and people got to know about what Open Cosmos was doing. We moved to Harwell, which is our home right now. It's a few kilometers down from Oxford. And we have grown since then from a team of around 15 to 40 something that we are now. This is another very important moment in our story, which is when we signed the agreement with the European Space Agency. This is Magali Valsier, the leader of the telecommunications department at the European Space Agency. And we signed a contract to provide them with entire space missions to demonstrate transceiver technologies in orbit. At the moment, we are manufacturing 2 satellites that will be flown. The applications are countless, and ever since we've had people from different backgrounds coming to us and asking, can you do this? Can you do this? Would you be willing to fly this payload or this technology? And our answer is, well, why don't we try? Here you have a development kit. Here you have a bit of software that allows you to do all the simulation. We call this software B-App. We call the development kit B-Kit, and our satellites are the Bs. And we allow them, actually, to go through a streamlined process of developing their technology hands-on, simulate the full mission, and when it's ready and it's working over there, we make it work in our satellites. Things escalated quickly again, and we closed a round of investment of $7 million from major venture capitalists. And we started growing, as I was saying. We doubled the size of the team every 6 months since we started. We are about 40 right now, everyone based in Harwell, and we are now expanding. Just 2 days ago, actually, we did this announcement with the European Space Agency that I think it's very, very appropriate to bring into this talk, because this is a partnership that we have established with the European Space Agency to run what is called Call to Orbit. This is a program that all of you right now, if you want to fly technology into orbit or derive space applications out of orbit, enables you to have free access to all of our tools, software and hardware, during a period of 3 months to get to orbital readiness. And once you have it there, we will partner with you to try to find you an in-orbit demonstration that will bring the technology up to orbit. The call has 2 parts, as I mentioned. The technology side, for all of you that want to develop all the technology, cameras, transceivers, sensors, and it has also a space application part for those of you that are only interested on the impact and the service that can be derived on the ground. So I want to finish maybe with a little bit of a personal point. Starting a company is always exposing yourself a little bit. It's challenging yourself and putting yourself on the spot. And to me, it's sort of this feeling that you have when you see a picture of yourself when you were 8 years old. This gets like Mars. It's this sort of embarrassment, the one that you need to expose yourself every single time that you take a step forward while building the company. But if you follow that little kid inside you, I would say, if you don't let it die among all the work or all the projects that you're engaged in, you pursue your goal and your objective, and you try to achieve it alongside with the people, amazing people that surround you, eventually you get there and you get to space. So anyone willing to contribute to bringing the technologies up to orbit, exploit space technology as a service, please get in touch with us. We are Open Cosmos, and we are here to help. Thanks. Questions? Okay, apparently we have time for questions. I had a few more embarrassing pictures if you want to see them later. So here comes the first embarrassing picture if you want. Guess what this is? This is a bunch of students. But if you look over the surface, you start seeing people who have built Open Cosmos and who have built other companies. This is our CTO. There is also a part of the systems engineering team. And all of these are people that were passionate about what they were doing. I have another cool picture. Look at this picture. What do you see? You might just see a rocket and a bunch of people there at the back around the table in a very, very humble chat, I would say. The people at the front are today PLD. You can see them exposing over there on the ground, one of the most promising rocket companies in Europe right now, growing with small satellites. The people at the background, some of them are now team members of Open Cosmos. So remember, be humble, stay looking around, and the opportunities are always around the corner. But questions now. This is enough about embarrassing pictures. Okay.
Everyone knows the answers.
That's cool.
Thank you. Next up, we have Kyle Asiano of iSpace. Thank you.
It's very nice to be introduced by my friend. I thought he would have said my biography or something, but My name is Kyle Cherno. I'm the Managing Director of iSpace Europe, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So I want to just talk about how I got into the space industry, how we are moving on into the space industry, and then maybe a little bit of a call out to ask you to join us together to the moon. So this first picture you see here is about how I got into the space industry. Now this is my hometown. For those of you that know me, I'm Canadian, I'm from the Rocky Mountains, and this is the village that I grew up in. And honestly speaking, I was never interested in space. I was always outdoors, climbing mountains, taking the dog sled, playing hockey, and I was always outside. And this community you see here is actually a very active mining community. And I was always a little bit sad about what was going on in the environment around me. And when I went to university, I knew that I wanted to study something to do with the environment, so I studied environmental security. And while I was in school, I realized that actually it's not just what's going on in my hometown, but there was an extreme amount of environmental destruction happening all over the world. And I honestly, through my studies, through all the working groups I was taking part in, with all the people that I was talking to, I didn't feel like the work I was going to be doing on Earth would be able to solve this problem. So one night I was thinking, and I was thinking really deeply, how could I find other resources so we wouldn't have to use the resources on Earth? What could I do? And I was looking up, and I looked up, and I saw the moon, and I thought, I wonder if there's resources on the moon. I wonder if we can use those resources there. And I started doing some investigation into space, and I came across this group called the Space Generation Advisory Council. And they had some working groups that were talking about, very exciting topics. They were talking about resources, they were talking about the law, they were talking about satellites. I didn't really know anything about it, but I decided to get involved. And this community is a very open community. I just started by joining a working group. I was invited to my first space conference, and I started to build a whole bunch of friends. Many of them are on the audience here today. Thank you for coming to watch. And this community is a very professional community, but it also becomes your friends and your family. So I took this picture last night in a Mexican club. And you can see that the friends that you make here actually become your colleagues, and they help you to really move to the next step. For me, that was the International Space University. And for those of you who don't know ISU, it's an excellent school. I'm sure there's a lot of ISU alumni in this room, but if not, and you want a really good education, broad education, ISU was the education that I needed to really understand space, and it also gave me the gateway into my first job. And I was looking for a job that had to do with space and space resources. And I started as an intern at a company called iSpace. So iSpace has a larger vision to expand the economic and social sphere to include the moon, and they want to use the moon's resources to do that. And I was really lucky to get in just as an intern for 3 months and start doing business analytics. And at that time, we were in a dead heat race for the Google Lunar Xprize. I won't talk too much about this because you just heard it, but essentially it was a big competition. Could we get some sound? This is a really loud rocket sound. It's pretty cool. There we go. To go to the moon, to land, and once you landed, you had to drive 500 meters, take HD video, send that HD video back to Earth, and you would win the grand prize of $20 million. So this was huge for us, and we really wanted to be a part of this mission. 34 teams from around the world joined, and we were only focused on developing a rover. We knew that if we were going to develop a lander, it was going to be extremely complicated, and we just wanted to focus on doing the rover, and that's what we did. We were very fortunate to become one of the 5 finalists in the prize, and we decided that we were going to work together with another team. We were just going to get a ride, and if we won the prize, we would share the prize. Because the prize, it wasn't, and you can ask any of the teams, it wasn't really about the money. It was more about the opportunity to show that it's not just Russia, China, and America that can go to the moon. It's a group of part-time scientists from Germany, or a bunch of guys in Japan on a tatami mat trying to figure this out. It was really just to prove that we could do something different. But all entrepreneurs have to have difficulties. And for us, that was the cancellation of the Google Lunar Xprize. And this was a really upsetting time for us because we really didn't know if we were ever going to be able to get a ride back to the moon. And this was our ultimate vision. So we realized that we also needed to go out again and find some other partners to help this come true. So we went to the market and we raised $95 million. And I think the theme here at the IAC is to include everybody. And it was mentioned earlier today that we can't just be working with the space industry. We really need to include others. And we went to some of the corporates that you see here, like Suzuki or Japanese Airlines, and we taught them what their business can benefit from space and how they can get involved. And ultimately, they saw that they could extend their business into space. Suzuki, for example, is helping us to develop our wheels. And for that, they decided to join in our mission and help us to build our own lunar lander. Hakuto R stands for Hakuto Reboot. It means that we're not giving up on our dream, we're rebooting the effort, and we continue to try to aim for space. And I'll just finish by saying that this is definitely something that we cannot do together. We're always looking for partners to help us to make this vision come true, and I truly hope that you'll join us on this mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle. So our final speaker for today before we start the reception is Harriet Brettel, grad student at Caltech. Please give it up.
Okay, hello everybody. So my name is Harriet Brettel. I'm a grad student at Caltech, and I want to start this presentation with a question. What is your personal mission? This is a question that I was asked not too long ago, and when I first thought about it, I realized that I didn't have an answer. I've always felt very driven and passionate about the work I do, but when I was asked this question, I realized I hadn't thought about what it was that was really driving me. My career up to that point had felt very disjointed. As many of you in this audience are the same as me, I'm sure, I grew up with a passion for space, but I didn't really appreciate that it was something I could do as a career. I'd always found space fascinating, and I still remember the first time I looked through a telescope and saw the moons of Jupiter. The vast scale of the cosmos is mind-boggling. It makes you feel incredibly small, but at the same time, it reminds you how important this pale blue dot we call home is. That feeling carried me through university, where I ended up studying mathematics. I figured learning the language of the cosmos was the best way to understand it. But I struggled with the abstract nature of the subject, and frankly spent way too much time looking at chalkboards that look very much like this. So I ended up switching to something more tangible and working in economics. However, after 4 years of working in finance, I hit what some people might call a quarter-life crisis, and began searching for a career path that I was more passionate about. And there's 2 organizations that I really want to credit for my eventual career change. The first is the Planetary Society, which reignited my passion for space exploration. The Planetary Society was founded in the 1980s by Carl Sagan, Lou Friedman, and Bruce Murray, as you can see, looking very happy about it up here. And they aimed to demonstrate by the mere existence of the organization that there was a great public interest for and support of space exploration. So in 2016, I became outreach coordinator for the Planetary Society in London, with the aim to strengthen the organization's presence in the UK. We organized a Space Up event in London, which brought together enthusiasts across the country to share our passion for space and embody the Planetary Society's mission of empowering global citizens to advance space exploration. The other organization that I want to credit to my career change, which has been absolutely instrumental, and ditto to Kyle over there, is the Space Generation Advisory Council, who organized this fantastic event here today, and through which I've met so many inspired and inspiring individuals. Through SGAC, I discovered a network of people who shared my passion for space, but not only that, they were exploring their passion in a variety of different ways. So with a newfound drive and confidence, I headed down a completely different career path. This time 14 months ago, I was working in a bank, and now I study planetary science at the California Institute of Technology. That change didn't happen overnight, and it certainly wasn't easy. Convincing other people that I had the skills necessary to transfer into a completely different field was a challenge. But even more of a challenge was convincing myself that this was something that I was really capable of. So, what am I doing now? I study storms on the surface of the largest planet in our solar system. So this is Jupiter, as you hopefully recognize. And this is the south pole of Jupiter in the infrared. Each of these cyclones that you can see here are 4,000 kilometers across. And we've really never seen anything like this anywhere else in the solar system, or anywhere beyond that, for that matter. And this discovery was made thanks to the Juno spacecraft, which is currently in orbit around Jupiter. So working at the forefront of space research has really opened my eyes to the process that brings these kind of missions to fruition. And traditionally, space exploration is done with a small number of big budget missions. So Juno, for example, was 11 years in the making and cost over $1 billion. But the growing commercial space industry is changing the way that we can do space research. CubeSat technology allows us to do Earth science and space-based observations of the cosmos in a faster, cheaper, and more efficient way. Venture capital investment in the space industry in 2015 was more than the prior 15 years combined. Spaceflight Industries will put your 3U CubeSat into low Earth orbit for less than $300,000. Open Cosmos, as we just heard from, will provide a whole, falling into the 6th floor, will provide an entire mission from start to launch, starting from $700,000, and deliver it in less than a year. So let's have a look at the space ecosystem and what the future of space research might look like. So starting with Earth science, commercial space industry has opened up new ways to get data. And one example of this is Planet's Education and Research Program, which offers 5-meter spatial resolution imagery of the entire world and opens it up to academics across the world who would otherwise not have access to this kind of data. One example of this is a professor at the Institute of Space Technology in Pakistan who is utilizing planet dove imagery to look at glaciated terrain in the region to better understand disaster events such as landslides. Moving on to the moon, as we just heard from Kyle, the Google Lunar Xprize has fostered a great commercial interest in going back to the moon. And again, this is something that the academic community is really excited about. So earlier this year, the Lunar Science for Landed Missions workshop developed a set of scientifically prioritized landing sites on the moon with the aim of collaborating with commercial landers and identifying strategic sites for further space exploration in the future. And if we look further ahead even more to the red planet. So far, CubeSats have only orbited the Earth. But Mars Cube 1, or MARCO, is a pair of CubeSats that are piggybacking off NASA's InSight mission, which is planning to land on the surface of Mars later this year. And by demonstrating the viability of CubeSat missions for interplanetary missions, particularly with a short development timescale, this kind of mission opens the way for new commercial and academic applications for this kind of technology. Now, it's still to say that it's early days, with a lot of commercial innovation in this field being driven by government support. But these early steps are incredibly important to pave the way for future work. And that leads us to think about the possibilities for deep space. And the utilization and analysis of asteroids is an example of a field where commercial interests and the academic community are beginning to come together. Asteroid mining is beginning to move from the realms of science fiction to science fact. And by facilitating an ecosystem beyond the pale blue dot, we're beginning to see these interests coming together. And one example of this is the work being led by the Milo Institute, which actually was announced earlier at IAC this year, which is being developed in collaboration with Arizona State University's New Space Initiative. And they're planning to develop a commercial business model that will launch a fleet of CubeSats and SmallSats to near-Earth objects with the aim of bringing together the commercial community and the academic community as well. So this is just the beginning of conversations that are happening between the academic community and the commercial space sector. And going forward, one of my goals is to bridge the gap between commercial space and the academic community. My driving passion is to connect. And with that, I realized I'd found my personal mission: to connect and empower individuals to advance the future space economy. And even though I didn't realize it at the time, each stage of my somewhat disjointed career had helped me move forward in the right direction. So working in finance had allowed me to develop analytical skills, lead international policy negotiations, and see how a global ecosystem fits together. Studying planetary science had given me confidence in asserting my credibility in the space world. It's given me a deep understanding into the priorities of academia and understanding how their priorities can change to adapt to the future space economy. Communicating science with the public keeps me inspired and reminds me why space is so important. And leading strategic partnerships for SGAC has given me insight, exposure, and a global network within the commercial space industry. It's helped me see how everything fits together and understand my place within it. So defining my personal mission has helped me find my place in space. And even though I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years' time, or even 1 year's time, I'm confident now that I'm heading in the right direction. My parting advice for anyone here who's still trying to figure out where they want to go is to identify your personal mission. Find what it is that drives you. And at each fork in the road, ask yourself, how does this align with my mission? Does it make the boat go faster? And does it keep me going in the right direction? But most important of all, don't forget to enjoy the journey. Thank you.